Welcome to another edition of Phil's Morning Drive. We're behind the wheel today in the 2014 Audi TTS. I thought it was time to get back to some performance cars here on the show. We've done a lot of SUVs and things of that nature, including a minivan a couple of weeks ago. So now we're behind the wheel, back to the performance cars here, and this is the Audi TTS, the 2014 version. So this is a car that, if you're not familiar with Audi, the way they do their performance models is they add the letter S along with a lot of horsepower and a lot of other features, and then if they add an R on top of that, the RS version, that's like the ultimate performance version of each model. Now the TT is a sporty car to begin with. So this being the TTS, it's kind of in the middle range, but it has about 54 more horsepower than the base TT model. It's a little bit more expensive, but you get quite a few more features as standard in addition to these awesome seats. This has the Audi exclusive interior with this red and black trim, which I think looks really, really nice, especially with a black exterior. And so it's nice because the red is kind of subtle. This is not overwhelmingly red. I know some folks, if you get a red interior, you also get red carpets and a red dash, and everything's red and it's kind of bright. But this, to me, is a good amount of red. So you have black, but then there's nice red trim. There's nice red where you can see it, too. You know, if you get red inserts on your seats a lot of times, if two people are in here, well, then you can't even see the red. So when you have a car like this, one of the main things that you want to do is drive it. So let's fire it up and take it for a spin here. One of the reasons I picked this car to be on the show is because of its affordability. This car is under $30,000 now, being that it's a 2014. It's got about 36,000 miles on it. And for that price, it really gets it down into the territory where more people can afford it. That's less, actually, than the average price of a new car in the US right now. And so, new, this car would have cost you around the $50,000 mark, especially with these options. Although the TTS really has almost everything you could want standard, unless you want a special interior like this. Most everything else is ready to go. You have a very nice Bose sound system. You have the automatic transmission. You have the sport mode, obviously the turbocharged engine at 265 horsepower, and it really makes a difference. I would definitely choose this over the base model, especially now that it's on the used market. I can understand if you're looking at a new one and you don't want to continue to step up in price, but on the used market, it makes a ton of sense to just go ahead and get the big engine that maybe you couldn't afford on a new one. I really like the way this car drives, especially as compared to the Porsche Boxsters, Porsche Caymans, but also the BMW Z4, and certainly the Mercedes SLK, now known as the SLC. Here's really how I would categorize each of these cars. The Porsches are definitely erring more towards the side of enthusiast. If you're a big-time car enthusiast, I would have a hard time steering you away from a Porsche Boxster or Cayman. If you want something that's more on the boulevard cruiser, or what we used to call like a beauty shop car, a car that you just get out on Saturdays and kind of tool around town, and you want to have the top down, and you don't necessarily want to do a lot of really hardcore driving, go with the Mercedes SLK. If you want a little bit more sportiness than that, then you can choose the BMW Z4. You want more sportiness than that, go with the Audi TTS. So I really slot this kind of in between the Porsche Boxster Cayman models and the Z4. You can get this as a roadster, so if you are looking for something with more open top feel. Another thing is, if you don't care about having a stick shift, that's really the other reason why I push more people towards the Boxster or Cayman, but because this car only comes in an automatic, at least in the S version. So if you want the extra power, the automatic is what you're going to have to deal with. Now, I have to say, this transmission is great. The paddle shifters work great. I actually have found myself not using the paddles in favor of just dropping the shifter from D back into S for sport mode, and then pushing the sport button, which really helps with the suspension. And so the throttle response, everything as far as that goes, really feels fine. You don't really feel the need to shift with your hands unless you just want to. You can use the shifter too, so that's another point. If you don't want to use the paddles, but you do want to shift manually, you can use the shifter to do so. In fact, we've pushed the sport button. Let me drop the shifter down into sport mode here. We've got a nice straightaway. I'll give it some juice and you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. That turbo really comes on strong. If you have it in regular drive, it will shift a little bit earlier than that, but when you put the shifter in sport mode, it lets you hold the gear all the way until red line. And since you've already chosen something that's an automatic car, you don't really need to use the paddle shifters because you can just focus on where you're going down the road and you know that it's going to hold it in that gear for as long as possible. I think that's probably another reason why I haven't been using the paddle shifters as much. The steering gets a little more play in it whenever you turn off the sport button, so I like the steering to be a little bit stiffer. I really like the way the steering feels, and so I've actually ended up leaving it in sport mode the entire time. Another reason to choose the convertible is the turbo noise. I can't really find a good way to record that here for the episode, but it has a very nice noise to it, and so that's something that I think you would enjoy more if you had the convertible, because you'd be hearing that even louder than what you do in this with the windows down. Some pros and cons on this car. The biggest con to me is that you can't get this with a stick shift. I do really like this automatic transmission. I haven't found it to really be a problem, but I do miss at least having the option to have a little bit of interaction with the car. On the pros list, a lot of things. Really, the price, I think this is really good value for the money. You get a navigation system, you get an excellent Bose sound system. I love the driving position in this car. I love these seats. I love the flat bottom steering wheel. I love the amount of power that this car has. The 0 to 60 time is right around 5 seconds flat, which I think is a really great time, because it's not so fast that the car gets away from you or that it's scary, but it's not so slow either that you're thinking, well, this is supposed to be a sports car, but I'm waiting for the car to get to 0 to 60. So this to me is kind of that sweet spot, especially with a car that has a turbo on it. The power still has that surging feel to it. It has plenty of torque, and it feels like when you're on country roads and you're on back roads and you're really wanting to drive it quickly, that you can really press on the gas, but you don't feel like the car's going to get away from you. But at the same time, it has plenty of power to still give you a very, very fun experience. And being that it's a 4-cylinder, you get 22 miles per gallon in town and well over 30 miles per gallon on the highway, which is not too bad. One of the other cons on the list to me is this navigation system. I really wish it was a touchscreen, and I wish it was easier to use just at a glance. All of these buttons and things, it gets kind of confusing, and some of the buttons just don't seem to be in the right place to me. On the other hand, it's just nice to have a navigation system in a performance car, because you really should be focusing on driving, let's be honest. One thing I will say, the suspension is a little stiff on this car, especially when you're just driving it around town and on some kind of broken pavement and things. If you're just in city traffic and things, it can be a little stiff, and the ride can kind of wear you out a little bit. But when you're out here, outside of town on these twisty roads, the firm suspension is such a welcome feature. This car just handles really well. It's just a really fun car to drive, and the amount of power makes it fun. Come out of this here, let me stop here for a second. I've pushed the sport button. Let's put the transmission in sport mode. I'll give it some gas here. So you can really hear that engine. It really winds up nicely. You can't really hear the turbo noise in the cabin, but if you roll the window down, it does have that nice turbo sound. Something else I want to talk about is the fact that this car has a back seat. You know, if you had a car seat, I suppose that you could put it back there. Really, what I would recommend is folding those back seats down. This car has probably the most cargo space of anything else in this segment. The Mercedes, the BMW, and the Porsche. Even though the Porsche has a couple of trunks, it would just be easier to get a larger suitcase in here if you fold those back seats down. Now, you do lose a lot of cargo space if you decide to go with a TTS Roadster, but in the coupe version, it's really the best all-rounder, because you do have so much cargo space, and you do have back seats if you want to use them in a pinch. So what's the verdict? Should you buy an Audi TTS? Well, I think if you're looking for a sports car, especially on the pre-owned market for under $30,000, depending on what you want, I think this could really fit the bill. You know, a lot of times the Porsches, even on the used market, tend to be quite a bit more expensive. But if you absolutely have to have a stick shift, you'll have to go that route. But I think if you're still wanting something that's very sporty, has a reasonable amount of power, and you don't mind having an automatic, or maybe you prefer having an automatic, I think the Audi TTS is really a great buy. Well, thanks for watching this edition of Phil's Morning Drive. You can find a lot more of our content on our website at philsmorningdrive.com. Make sure you go to all the social media channels, add this to your watch list, hit the like button, follow, subscribe, whatever it is you do on your favorite channels, do that, and we'll see you next time.